Hey everybody, welcome to something a little bit different for the channel today. As you can see from the title of the video, last year in 2020 I painted 494 different models, and I'm just going to kind of showcase those to you, but probably more importantly for you, there will be some links in the description here to a website called War Games Delivered. I'll have a link there to click to that, and then a little discount code. So you can get all kinds of paints and other supplies, even they have some board games and stuff like that. But they got a ton of painting supplies. And if you use the little discount code, you get 10% off. And you can use that whenever you want. So I thought, okay, what they did is they sent me this box of Army Painter, the Mega Paint set. And so some of the miniatures that you see here I used with these paints. I'd never used an Army Painter before. And I've done a lot of different techniques here. So if you remember back in, I think it was 2019 now, I did a video called, I painted 66 miniatures, all with only contrast paints. I'll put a link to that here, and you can click over if you missed that video. But it was a cool kind of experiment. I went through and said, just find all the different kinds of miniatures and primed them in different ways. And I was just learning the contrast paints that they had just come out. And so I did that. So I'm gonna do kind of the same thing here. I have some stuff that I painted with only contrast. I paint a mix of contrast and Army Painter, or contrast and some Vallejo paints. I typically use, until recently with the Army Painter, I typically though use Citadel paints, you know, washes and shades and their normal paints, as well as their contrast paints, or Vallejo paints as well. So I've got a lot of different stuff here. So about half of these 494 models are like real miniatures, you know, that you would use in a game like Warhammer or something, and the other half is like terrain, or even like 3D printed pieces and stuff like that, which is terrain as well. And then I got like some endless spells and for Mage of Sigmar, which is kind of terrain. So it's about half models, half terrain. You know, there's a whole bunch of other things. There's metal and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of stuff here. It's not all Games Workshop stuff. A lot of it is. I'm going to go through everything kind of in the chronological order, because to wrap up the end of the year, to be completely forthcoming here, I was finishing up my Legion of Azgorh army, which, interesting story, but when we get to that, I'll talk more about that. But so I did kind of bleed into the first sort of weekend of 2021 with that, wrapping that up and kind of finishing them off with a varnish and so on. So a little bit of a cheat there, but I painted the vast majority of that army in 2020. So we'll kind of walk through all that stuff here, and I'll have timestamps for all the different stuff. So if you want to skip around, you know, you don't have to sit here and watch this. It'll probably be like a 45-minute video maybe or something. I'm not sure at this point. But if you're like, I don't want to care about the terrain, you know, or whatever, you can go and look at the timestamps below, or scan through the bottom of the thing and skip to like, oh, maybe I want to see how he painted this particular Warhammer Underworlds warband, or whatever you want to do. So let's go ahead and jump down to the table there, and then we'll kind of walk through it. And again, take a look at the discount code and the link there to War Games Delivered. If you want some paint stuff, you can get 10% off, and they got a lot of stuff. So definitely give them a look. Okay, just kind of a quick scan through of the whole table, just kind of give you a larger sense of what, you know, kind of a year's worth of painted stuff is. Lots of terrain over here, all kinds of miniatures in the middle there, a little bit more terrain and stuff over here. We got some doors from Kill Team and so on, and Rogue Trader. So that's what it kind of looks like. It fills up almost the whole 6x4 table with all the terrain there kind of just piled up haphazardly. So let's just jump down and we'll start walking through it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover here are some Warhammer Underworlds warbands. Now this is not going to be pure chronological order. So this is a style that I've used a couple of years ago when Soul Wars came out. And this is one of the Warhammer Underworlds warbands, the Stormcast. So I wanted to paint it in this Lions of Sigmar style with the purple and the red, which is how I painted a lot of those new style models that they come out with. So this is just straight up Vallejo paints with a little bit of Citadel paints kind of mixed in for some of the metals and the washes and stuff like that. But it's pretty straightforward. You know, you got the normal kind of like, you know, build up the layers, do a little bit of highlighting and shading and that kind of stuff. So kind of a return to form. It gave me a nice break from contrast, because honestly I've been painting a whole ton of contrast for a long time, basically all of 2019 right into 2020. I was just hooked on it and addicted to it. But separating from that now, here is the Flesheater Quartz warband, and this is all contrast. So I do have a Flesheater Quartz army, and actually finished it, or sort of added to it, I should say, which I'll show you in a minute. But these are all contrast here. You've got some like just pure Flesheater red and everything. The contrast works really well in these. You get a better look at that when I show you some of the other figures that are for my army specifically. It really turns out really well on the Flesheater core. So did this one, and then kind of bouncing around a little bit, I went back and did this Night Haunt warband, and again the Soul Wars box set. I went back to the style that I painted that, so I can kind of mix these in if I really wanted to. I probably actually won't mix any of this in, other than I would use her as a Hag Queen. So yeah, so she's kind of the leader of this warband. These are all just the Chain Rasps hordes, and this is pretty straight, just some black paint on kind of the cloth. But this ghostly color here is nickel oxide, I think it's called, with some Lamian medium kind of thinned down for like the ghostly sort of spirity kind of things like that. But just some other little, you know, yellow paints and gold paints and stuff like that. They're pretty straightforward there. Next up is this warband of the Mirmund Banshees, and this is the typical unit kit that you get for Age of Sigmar anyway. These models are identical to that. And this is just straight up contrast here. Lots of contrast medium to kind of thin it down, and then just dry brushed white for kind of the back of these claws, because I did paint these kind of like they're indicated on the box art, so to speak, here, just to kind of set them different away apart from those chain wraps and that kind of style there. So this is just that thinned out, really thinned out blue there, the Talisar blue, really thinned out, and similar here with the Agar's Dunes. And it's just this super quick. I mean, you just lay down this contrast here. This is probably like Basilicanum gray, really thinned out on there. Snakebite leather, really thinned out, and so on these bits there, with a little bit of the blood for blood glad to add for the blood there. So this is all, that was all kind of the early year of the Warhammer Underworlds. And then not too far into it, I painted this, and this is like the third time I've painted this particular unit, but I got the Warhammer Underworlds box for that. And then this one, you'll kind of see this come in a little bit later. So it's kind of cool that I thought of this sort of paint job, or decided on it. I didn't think of it because I've seen this in the books 100 times, but this kind of black with gold when the red. I was like, I got it. These guys are like a stealth unit. They're, you know, they're Vanguard hunters. You know, they're kind of a elite strike force unit. So I want to paint them like that, so I can still drop them into my army, which is kind of the mix of that Lions of Sigmar with the Hammers of Sigmar style. But hey, if I want a little elite unit, these guys can have their own little sort of paint scheme. And I was just kind of getting sick of painting that, and I wanted to paint some black and stuff. So that's how these guys look here, but we'll see this again actually in a little bit. So we're done with the Warhammer Underworld stuff that I did at the beginning of the year, and kind of dovetailing on top of that, as I was painting some of the Flesheater ones that I showed you, I able to kind of finish out my Flesheater Courts army. Now I have a whole other 2,000 points of these or so off to the side, but I wanted to kind of round out some of the different units here. So we've got a little 10-man squad of these ghouls here, and so these are all, I tried a little experiment, because I have the same exact color scheme here, painted with kind of the mix again of Vallejo and Citadel paints, but this is all contrast paints. I got it really close. I mean, if you were looking at it and trying to pick it apart, you could definitely see that this unit of 10 is a little bit slight different tone there. But if you mix them in and mix these guys, you know, kind of within the other individual units, they'll kind of just bleed into each other. So it's kind of got like a dead flesh sort of look there with some of the blood for blood god. Anytime I have a death army, I put that blood in there, but I don't put it in my chaos armies, but this is how it is. So anyway, I finished out this unit of 10 here, just kind of basic and boring. These are a small little squad there. And then we have one unit here of the Flayers, and then we have the Haunters over here. That's not the name of them, but so this guy's is just a pure red here, and you can see you get some pretty gradations of the tones and the shades and everything just with that contrast paint on there like that. So it worked out pretty well. Again, this is just like experimental. I did want to add these units anyway to kind of give me, so I've got 9 of these and 9 of the Haunters there, but I want to kind of do some color experiments there, because each of the units of 3 I have are all different colors from each other anyway. So this actually looks kind of cool. I like this sort of the style. I've seen actually a lot of Flesheater Courts armies that are like all red like this, and I don't know if I could bear to look at that on the table, but I do like that look. It's got a really kind of interesting look, and it goes with one of their like battalions or something. I'm kind of forgetting the name of that, but it's kind of a cool thing there. So we'll take a look at those, and I like these. Turned out really well here. There's a lot of sort of little nooks and crannies in these guys here, with these again thinned out green paints there. These are all contrast paints with the blood god on there, and you got like the bone and stuff like that. So it works out pretty well for these. And it was a real quick way to kind of just knock out these couple of units here and sort of really kind of finish out the army for myself. And then you have here the Arc Regents, and he is also lots of contrast paint. Again, the thinned out skin tone. Just use a real basic skin tone on him, like you would for a human. And then again, this is like Basilicannon Gray or maybe Space Wolves Gray, thinned out on there. And you do pick up a lot of details and stuff. So it's a really good, quick way of knocking out these units here, and then have to spend too much time, you know, kind of rounding out my army there. Now I also, for the Flesheater Courts, did their terrain piece and then their endless spells here. So let's just take a quick look at the terrain piece. This was perfect, and I find this is all contrast, and it's just perfect for terrain because terrain's not something I like to spend a whole ton of time on. I like to make it look halfway decent and then move on, and then, you know, try to spend more time focusing on the models. But the Skeleton Horde contrast paint, you just boom, put that on all of these skulls, and it just looks really cool. It just works. It just, you knock it out, and it's just, you know, bones for days there. And then again, this is either Basilicannon Gray or Space Wolf Gray. It's been a while. A little bit thinned out again to kind of soften it up, and that gives you your brick and your stone and that kind of stuff. And then just kind of went into the bottom there with some snakebite leather and bones and some blood, and so this made this blood like dripping down the stairs and everything. Super quick to do. You know, you can kind of just knock out this bones and then move on and paint something else for a little while. And then here are the endless spells, and I really liked how these turned out. The ghostly color here, you'll see if you go back and look at the Night Hunt Warhammer Underworlds warband. The same idea with a little bit of a green wash to kind of darken it coming out of there. So these are like ghostly horses just springing out of the ground. And similar with this little chalice here, you have this with the bone, the Skeleton Horde for the bone. That's a contrast. So this is just one color contrast, the nickel oxide with Lamian medium on this stuff, and then you kind of throw a little bit of a, I think it was Athonian camo shade or something. There's a few different green washes there. So yeah, you just kind of do that to kind of, you know, give a little bit of shadow on the bottom there. It looks pretty cool, and it's pretty quick to do. And then again, similar thing there with some little flesh colors and stuff like that on this, I forget the name of this, whatever this kind of wall is here that you can cast. So anyway, that's the Flesheater Court stuff. I did do another grip of terrain and endless spells, and I'll show you those now. Okay, here's 4 more of these. Now this one in here is a Balewind Vortex. Any faction in Age of Sigmar can use this. This is, again, simple contrast paints. I did hit it with some metallics on the top there and a little bit of dry brushing, but this is just really that nickel oxide Lamian medium thing, again with the ghostly kind of spell casting thing, and then some darkened up Skeleton Horde and some Black Templar and stuff like that. I think I used the Black Templar on top of the Skeleton Horde there, and then again just some silver paint just to kind of, you know, kind of pick out some highlights and stuff kind of cheaply. So this is a cool endless spell. Lots of people can use that. Here are the Stormcast endless spells, which I had set around, just hadn't got around to fixing. This one here is I think it's Talisar blue, yeah. So I did this and I just painted it and thinned it out as I went up to the top here. And then I have just the probably Sigmar brown, which is a contrast paint on the bottom here. And then I just kind of did a quick little dry brush on this thing just to catch some of the things. That's their something comet. I don't remember the name of it. So that's the comet there. Then you have this little dais here, which is like a gold disc. This is Azgorh Dunes is right on there. A little bit of silver paint there. And then this the nickel oxide thing. There's one thing I do, yeah, not a lot of my endless spells here, but I've done with a lot of my older ones, is I put in some gel medium in the bottom of the base and then paint in the, well, hold on, yeah, actually, so with this one here, so this here is not part of the model. I should make that clear. I put the gel medium in there, so it looks like it's kind of growing out of the ground. And I did a similar thing here. On some of the older ones, it actually looks probably a little bit better than this even. But that way you get kind of this little vortex thing coming out of the ground with some gold highlights there on some of these hammers. I forget what this one's called, but it's a Stormcast Eternal endless spell. So those are some endless spells, and I've got a couple more that are kind of endless spells. So you could call these the Khorne endless spells, but they're officially called Judgments. And then I also have this terrain piece, which is the first thing we'll look at here, this altar. So all this stuff here was done with a fair amount of contrast. I did lay down all contrast on this one and then touch it up with like a thinned out Retributor gold. So it's just the Azgorh Dunes, and I went back over it on the gold pieces because Khorne is like, it should be like really gold kind of in a way, but also more like brass actually. But it should be some, I think it should have some metallic quality, at least for my stuff. Yeah, so I painted this out, but this red is all the Blood Angel red, and just kind of thinned out a little bit. I think it picks it up on this piece pretty nicely there. It's a good, kind of a solid, kind of different tone of red there. And then you have these judgments, and I just went crazy with the Blood God. And talking about using that gel medium on the bases here, and then putting that down, letting it dry, and then going over it with Blood God, and then some metallics here on some of the different stuff. I really like how this sort of Khorne icon turned out. I mean, it's just, you're going nuts with the blood, but it's just, in the books, in the novels, they kind of talk about when they cast these prayers or these judgments, kind of blood erupts out of the ground, and then, you know, it's like a spell comes out of there. So I thought, well, let's make it look like there's just a boiling blood hole in the ground, and then, you know, this horrible magic comes out of it. Don't call it magic though. So kind of skipping around just a little bit here. Here you can see some 3D printed terrain pieces. Now these are for Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress, and I've done a couple of videos on this terrain. I'll put some links in the description and the cards. These I have showed before in one of the videos. This is all done with contrast here. So this is 3D printed plastic PLA terrain, and I did basically all contrast, some dry brushing and stuff like that you can see here. But this is just stuff for some of the expansions for that game. You know, there's some washes and some dry brushing and stuff, but mostly it's just contrast here. And so I've shown this before, I just wanted to show it again. Now what I also did at the same time is I painted some of the expansions for the figures. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those. And again, these will be all contrast paints actually. So the first part is, here are some of the newer heroes that you can play, and these also come in the Combat Arena board game box, which I'm not sure if you can buy that anymore. But again, these are all contrast paints. I do touch it up a little tiny bit in some spots with some metallic, but very little actually on most of these. Again, so these are just the 4 new heroes here. Different guys. So you got the Admech and the Rogue Trader, Rogue Psyker, I think that is, and then this kind of robot guy, and then this guy's sort of like an Inquisition type of dude there. Again, these are all contrasts here. They may not be contrast on the base. I wanted its base to match my other figures from that game. And the next stuff here, these are what you call retinue heroes. These are in either the Warhammer Quest Annual or the White Dwarf magazine. And you can use these, you can kind of like go on quests and sort of recruit them as sort of helpers here. And again, these are all on contrast. So this is a unit of the Ogrins here, which you might find in an Astra Militarum army. And so I painted or built these up in the way that kind of they're depicted in the magazine, and then painted them up kind of relatively closely there. I wasn't really super happy with how all 3 of these came out, but they seem to come out okay. This kind of green armor is kind of interesting, but I don't know. I like this guy. He looks all right. And then the other one here is this, he is like a Sister Adeptus or Sororitas dude, but he's like a messed up flayed guy, and so you can use him as kind of a standalone sort of add-on guy there. So get that one on eBay and painted him up. And then, because I think they come in a big unit or something, you'll need 1 for the game. So, and then here is your orc here with this big old stupid gun and all this stuff. I really have an inkling to get an orc army for this, just because I like painting these orcs, but I'm not going to do it. But I really like this. I just like these models. They're just super fun and funny. But yeah, again, this is all contrast and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun painting this sucker there. So he's a kind of a guy that will come and help you just blow stuff up. And here is effectively 2 units of the Chaos Cultists. Again, these are all contrast paints. I do go back in on some of the spots here and add a little bit of metallic on top of it, almost like as a highlight in some ways. So you can see like these guys here with the flamethrowers, I kind of did sort of edge highlighting with some of the metallic bits on some of the cables and things like that, just to kind of give it a little bit more spacey feel. One thing I will say about this is I think at this point I sort of stopped using the bottled Citadel sort of varnish, because I've kind of bounced around in the varnishes that I use. So I haven't changed this, but I do have a mind to go hit these with the flat matte medium from, or flat matte varnish spray from Army Painter. I started really using that. Once I got the Army Painter box, and I hit some of these other models with it, I'm like, man, that's just the finish is really nice on those. And just like on anything that I sprayed it with, it just has a real nice quality to it. Almost feels like it like instantly improves the paint job in some ways. But I left these kind of shiny. There's a little bit glossy for me. And I think that, you know, if I get a hankering one of these days, I'll hit them with a matte spray and kind of just tamp down the glossy a little bit on it. And I think I have a little bit of better quality on these. Anyway, so that's all the Warhammer Quest stuff. And so moving out of the Games Workshop world for a minute, we're going to look at some stuff from Metal King Studios. And this is for Relicblade. So if you watched the channel at all last year, I moved, and so just prior to moving, I took about a 3-month break from, you know, preparing the house and moving and all that stuff and not really painting anything. But before that, I got into 2 games. One of them was Relicblade, and these are metal miniatures with contrast paint. And I was kind of excited for the game anyway, but then I was like, oh, they're metal, and I hate metal. But these are kind of beginner-friendly metal models, relatively speaking. And I was like, okay, I'll give these a shot. And then I'm like, that'll be cool. I can try contrast on metal, which is something that I hadn't done in that previous video. Again, I'll have a link to that contrast paint video I did. But yeah, so this is just like, you know, the skeleton horde on the bone and stuff. A little bit of a thin down purple there. This is like an aethermatic blue or aethermatic green. I can't remember what it's called. They got the Talisar blue and stuff like that. Snakebite leather, you know, on the little book he's carrying there and stuff like that. So I really liked how these turned out, and I really like this game. And I really want to add to this little bitty collection I have here. But yeah, these turned out pretty well. I really like how they turned out, and they were pretty quick to do, and they took the paint well and everything. And I think, you know, I'm pretty excited to play more with this game if I get a chance here and people start getting together a little bit more. But yeah, so these are from Relicblade. Definitely recommend the game. I'll put a link to my review of it as well. It's not a very well-known game, but I definitely recommend folks take a look at it, especially if you have like teenagers or even younger kids. I suspect that it's great for that kind of thing, but that's not really a knock against the game. There's a really kind of there's a good amount going on to keep you engaged and have fun playing. But anyway, those are from Relicblade. And the second game that I just started to get into before moving, and actually had sort of begun painting and then halted and then finished up once I got back to into the new house, was Kings of War Vanguard. So I got 2 warbands and then this terrain here to show you. This is more like objective markers and stuff like that. And everything I'm going to show you here was painted mostly contrast with a little bit of mix of stuff like some little metallics and dry brushes and stuff like that. But really at this point I was kind of getting burnt out on contrast all the time. So you'll start to see where I start to mix it up a little bit, especially when I get into some of the Warcry warbands and stuff that I'll show you in a little bit, and my Legion of Azgorh army. Yeah, anyway, so these are just all contrast here, thinned out, whatnot. I use the contrast like as a wash to kind of do the markings there, the Black Templar and stuff like that. But this is all contrast. And one weird thing about this terrain here is it is super like sticky. Let's see if you can see. See that? That's so strange. I don't know why it does that. But yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. It looks fine. I mean, I don't know. It's just strange, very strange. It's a type of resin that they used here for this game, and it's really sticky. Let's see if I can lift that up. Yeah, see that? That's so strange. But anyway, that's the terrain that you can get for the objective markers in Vanguard. So the first warband here are these Basileans, basically the humans. These kind of like the good humans. And again, these are mostly contrast with a little bit of metallics and highlighting and like that, but it's just, I would say it's probably 90% contrast. I think I did some edge highlighting in here too, just a little bit, just to kind of pick out some more of the details. But I had a good time with this one. This one is basically featuring the Warband box set and then the Warband booster box set. So you get all of these minus, see this big fella in the back here, or in the front if you want to look at him. And then this cool looking gal here, she's kind of like a ninja, I don't know, superstar ninja girl or something. And then there's another one here, oh, this guy with the big old mallet. So you get these 3 in like a booster box, and then you get the rest of them in their own box there. And it's pretty cool because it gives you like a full-on 400 points warband there with all that, which is like all you'll ever need, pretty much. You you know, maybe you could buy another character or something. I don't know. But yeah, this one turned out pretty good, but not as good as the next one. Now this next warband is the Abyssal Dwarves. They're kind of like their Chaos Dwarves. And again, it's a similar idea here. This is all contrast, a little bit of metallics. I really liked how these turned out. I don't know what it was. It's just the models, and I really like the idea of a Chaos Dwarf, which you'll see in a little bit. But see, if we show that guy there, I mean, this got his little face, his white beard, kind of a bony metallic shield there. Cool little thing there. I really like how the armor turned out on these guys. Just, you know, the thinned out Basilicanum gray again, little metallic kind of highlights picked out, and gold highlights too, as well as the silver there. Let's just focus on that guy there. Yeah, see, it turns out pretty good there. And I really like how these guys look. They did a really good job with these sculpts. And again, the front group here is kind of the main warband box, and then the booster box here, you get this cool big sucker there. I love this. It's so ridiculous. It's like a molten rock monster with this giant cannon. This silliness. It's great there. And this is all this contrast. Black Templar, a little bit thinned out, maybe a little bit metallic highlighting on the gun. Barely, not really much though. And you got some of the oranges and things that pick out the gun. And you have this thing as a hex caster there. That's cool. Little eyeball in the middle there. And I forget what this guy is. But he's this big metallic, you know, dude with a hammer. And this is basically all you need there. I'll put a link to the review of that game. I reviewed it not too long ago, a few months ago. This one, I would say if you got all these, you'd be good to go. Plus, you probably want to pick up there's a dwarf wizard caster guy, which I don't have. But I would say that once you got that, then you got everything that you'd ever need. Anyway, so that is the Vanguard stuff. And so this is about the time I moved back here or into the new place. So I picked one model actually before I finished up these to kind of get me back into things. And this is this Bloodthirster. I believe it's the Bloodthirster of Infinite Rage. So this is again almost 90% contrast. This is one, once I got moved in, and I was like, I need to paint, but I was like not really feeling inspired, and I had this guy sitting around for, you know, a few months. And I was like, okay, I need to paint this guy, get him done, because I had already done all the Khorne and the spells, which I showed you in the previous section. I was like, hey, this is the last piece, I got to get them done. And I was just in a funk with painting, right? Because I'd been really painted for 3 months in the whole moving process. So I had a lot of fun with this one, mostly because I took a lot of those skulls. They have those skull packs you can get, and I just piled a crap ton of them on here, hit them with the skeleton horde, mixed in some of the different Liquitex resin sand medium into it. It's kind of like a dirty, grungy thing. So it's like crushed up little skulls underneath these big skulls and so on. And then painted up, you know, all the stuff. So this is mostly contrast paint, some edge highlighting, some metallic bits picked out and stuff just to kind of give it that shine. And then on the back here, we've got the skull with the different Khorne symbols, kind of glare there, but yeah, so you can see that there and so on. Anyway, so that's this guy, and so I had a lot of fun just finally getting around to finishing out that army as well as my Flesheater Courts army this past year. So pretty cool. I like this model. It's like a Balrog or something. So the next thing we're going to go through is a bunch of kill team terrain as well as some Warcry terrain. I basically was getting caught up with my terrain for that, so I've gotten the different ravaged lands, you know, for Warcry, and the kill zones for kill team. Wanted to get those kind of caught up, and this stuff's just useful for anything, not just those games. So here you got your boxes, and again, I hit these with actually like some cheap, like $2 paint cans, like the Krylon stuff. Hit them with some of the Typhus Corrosion and the Sterling Mud technical paints. Not a lot of it. I mean, not even made a dent in any of those bottles, and just kind of like banged them out, different colors, a little bit of blood for the blood god on that one. Just hit it with this cheap yellow through the dirt on there. And again, not something that I spend a ton of time on because I don't really want to, because you could really mire in and you could get super detailed with this stuff, but they're kind of set pieces, they're line of sight blockers, and just enough to kind of be somewhat immersive. I mean, how much time do you spend looking at terrain? So I know it sounds like I'm making excuses, but I'm really not. I'm just trying to explain the thought process behind how much time I spend on a piece of terrain. Anyway, so this stuff I probably spent maybe the least amount of time on was this particular set here. So let's move this out of the way. We'll kind of walk through some of the kill team terrain and then some of the Warcry terrain after that. Now this next kill zone, I kind of forget the name of it, but I'll put it in the description if you're curious. This one is not sprayed with the cheapy Krylon paint. It's sprayed with the Khorne Red from Games Workshop, and then dry brushed a little bit with metal. Kind of dry brush the Martian iron crust on there, not the iron earth, but the iron crust, just so it looks all beat up and stuff. And again, just kind of quick and dirty. It has some little bit of depth to it, a little bit of details. The dry brushing kind of picks it up. You know, to me, it's good enough for a game with terrain. And you know, hopefully the models will do all the work in terms of the painting detail. But anyway, that's that set there. All right, this next stuff is the Mechanicus stuff. This one just hit with lots of metallics and different kind of, like, you know, texture paints and stuff like that. These is all configurable. If you've not seen this before, you can take this stuff apart and then have little platforms and stuff. I have too much of this stuff. So this is just what comes in the one kill zone there, but I have like so many of these in different colors of them and stuff like that. So I just kind of did these pretty quickly, muted colors, some metallics and things like that again. So I covered that up pretty quick though. But again, this stuff, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this. So, I mean, if you're like intimidated by terrain for any reason, like don't be, just do stuff. Just throw paint on there and be done. Okay, so 2 more bits of the kill team terrain. This is the ruins here that kind of come with the original box set, but it has some other additions like these different skulls and things. This is just hit with Xandri dust and then hit with some contrast paints, kind of acts as a wash here. So you can see like this guy right there. A little bit of metallics in there, a little bit of kind of a wash there. Pretty quick, obviously, you know, not a whole lot of detail gone into here. But you know, it looks okay. Once you get it on the table, you know, you're in playing, it looks pretty good. So now the only other thing really to show you is, I'm not going to show you all these. There's about 20 or so of these doors that I hit with some dirt, sterling mud, typhus corrosion and stuff like that. Just, you know, hit them with silver, hit them with that. Again, I could go in doing detail like that, but I was like, I'm not going to paint 20 doors worth of detail. So some of these are from like the Rogue Trader box set and the Kill Team Arena and so on like that. But yeah, so just some doors in there. And this stuff works good with that the Dark Uprising, that terrain that they came out with at the end of 2019. So this stuff is good in there too. Now we'll jump into some Warcry terrain. This is part of a set here of one of the Ravaged lands. I think it's called the Soul something Forest, Soul Drain Forest maybe. Again, this is hit with some cheap Krylon green, a little bit of shading with some contrast paint, not too much, and then some Mournfang brown down here. And then I went back over the main trunk with some Wildwood contrast paint, just to kind of give it a couple of different tones there. Yeah, super quick to do all these trees. Again, they look good enough. So I didn't spend a lot of time on them, but I think these actually look pretty decent. And then here's some other pieces that kind of go along with that, as well as another piece of terrain I'll show you. This is just hit with some Mournfang brown on those. This kind of the dark gray paint from GW, and then some dry brushing and stuff like that, just to kind of pick out some of the highlights and things like that. Again, this is just all super dead quick. You could go back in here and do some details. I don't really have the inkling or desire to do that, but again, this is just a way to get it done, get it looking decent. It looks great when it's on the board. That goes with Warcry, or even on a table like this with Age of Sigmar. It starts to space it out and stuff, and you got just ruins and stuff everywhere. And it's been sitting there for a million years, so it just has dirt on it. And the next set here, this is called the Defiled Ruins. This is pretty good. I spent a little more time on this one. Got some Mournfang brown, highlighted with some metallics, did some kind of orange contrast on top of that, kind of as a wash or like a little bit of a texture or effect paint. And you can kind of see it there with the doors and things like that. This terrain is really cool because it has this kind of configurable sides here, so you can just kind of plop these in and slide them in like that. So it's really easy to kind of, you know, configure and modulate your table there and take stuff apart and, you know, just mix the terrain around and all that kind of stuff. I like this big Sigmar statue there. That's pretty cool. So not spending too much time on it, just catching details and stuff. So we'll show you three more pieces of Warcry terrain. First thing are these objective markers. Now you could use these in Warcry or Age of Sigmar, and these are just very quickly painted little terrain pieces or objective markers with some highlighting and metallics and dry brushing. And yeah, these are just 6 little pieces there, very quickly done. And then this is some of the terrain that you get in the Catacombs box for Warcry. So they get some of the outdoor terrain, and I just did the video for this a couple of months ago. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. I talked a little bit about that, and as well as my initial review for Warcry, you would have seen some of this in here. But then we've also got some of the interior terrain, which I'll just show you quickly again. But again, I'll have a link to the review. So here's a doorway for the interior catacombs. You know, put a little bit more color and thought into these here, because it was something new that I hadn't painted in a while at all. So you got some bones and stuff like that. This is all contrast here, again, with kind of the metallics as a highlight or some dry brushing on top of that. So this is pretty quickly done there. So you can see we've got the bones in there, a little bit of highlights with the metallics and so on. Let's see here. So they got these little bridges, same idea there, contrast down here, dry brush metallics on there. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So we got 4 Warcry warbands to go over, and then we'll close off with my Legion of Azgorh army after that. So these here were all done with the Army Painter paints and no other paints. So this is all their flesh tones, their blacks, their washes, and so on. This is the Aspire Tyrants warband here. So it was kind of a nice kind of break to go back to a more traditional type of paints, you know, process here. And I was happy with it. I was happy with how the paints behaved and everything, and they laid down the color nice. So you could thin them out pretty decently. You could get some good colors out of them. You know, the colors in that box that I showed you at the beginning took care of all this stuff, and I was able to kind of keep it, you know, I keep putting my hand in the way there, but keep it relatively to scheme, and I was able to kind of match this with the GW scheme for this particular warband, and I think it turned out pretty well. I do like how this one turned out. And then I did another one. This is the unmade Warcry warband. Again, this is all Army Painter paints. Just, you know, the traditional, like, lay down a base coat, do a wash, do edge highlights, and so on. You know, use some metallics and so on like that. There we go, focus on that. So yeah, these guys are pretty interesting. Here, this will kind of tell you everything you need to know about these guys. So this guy peeled off his own face and then stuck it on his belt buckle. And then now he wears this stupid hood with a skull on top of it. And he's cut off his own legs and his arms, and he's just pure blades running around. So yeah, he's dedicated, let's just say that much. Pretty gruesome to read the short story about them in the original Warcry anthology, but it's a good read. Anyway, so that's a good warband there. These guys are kind of hard to show off, I think, on camera because they're so spindly. There we go. Here's a cool looking guy there, just leaping off the little ruin there, jumping off there. Yeah, these guys you're gonna poke something and break these pretty easy if you're not careful. All right, so that is the unmade. So we'll look at now the 2 warbands from the Catacombs box. And again, these are painted, again, all with the Army Painter paints and washes and everything like that. This was a cool one to paint. I really like this one, how this guy turned out. Especially this guy, I should say. I think he turned out pretty well with the sword, with the flames coming out, and kind of leathery pauldrons there, kind of a little pelt on the back of his cape and all that stuff. So pretty cool. I liked how these guys turned out, and I really liked this paint. It was easy to work with and quick, and you know, you got the washes and some of the effects and different paints like that. So anyway, this is that one, which I've already shown you in another video. I'll show you the last warband here. And these guys, again, I showed you not too long ago in my Warcry Catacombs review, but this is kind of the Marathi Dark Elf, Murder Elf warband. And you know, I would probably choose a different color scheme for this. I was going with the kind of the standard scheme that they have on the box cover. I think it looks okay, but I'd probably do something a little bit different with this one. But again, all Army Painter highlights and shades and all that good stuff there. So there you go. So the last piece now is to talk about is my Legion of Azgorh / maybe it's now a Cities of Sigmar army. So this is about 3,000 points worth of stuff here. So I've got 1 unit here, or 2 units I should say, of the Ironsworn. These are kind of like the little melee units here. These are Chaos Doors if you're not familiar with them. So we'll get a good zoom in there of this guy. And then, so he's got kind of like a red hat with kind of a red leathery thing on the back there with a little bit of gold, little symbol there, you know. So these guys are kind of painted in sort of a Slaves to Darkness type of vibe there. So there's 20 of those, and then there's 50 of these suckers here. These are the guys with the guns over here, and there's more over there. And you can see here, so these guys are sitting on top of, let's see if you can see that, this kind of cork board at the bottom that I dry brushed with kind of like a lava base there. So when you put them out all together, They're all kind of like Fire Mountain dwarves or something like that. So those were all done, and these were painted again with a lot of army painter paints, a little bit of contrast, like the red helms is Flesheater red contrast, the metallics and stuff like that, and some of the bases and things like that were army painter paints, just oranges and yellows and things like that. So there's a lot of those there. I have these guys. These guys are called the Kadai Fireborn. I'm not super happy with these. You guys are just basically giant flame monsters with a little bit of metal on them. This is basically all contrast paints except for the metallics, and I kind of took the contrast from red to orange to yellow a little bit into the bases there, not using the corkboard base, but just kind of having them kind of flame up out of the ground in a way. So I don't really, this was the one I was like least excited to paint, because it's just like giant like texture madness, just texture everywhere, and it's like you don't have to do a lot. It looks good, it looks okay, you know. Anyway, so those are those 6 guys. They're just kind of a weird, I do like them. Like once they're done and like on the table, it looks cool, but I don't know, just not exciting to paint those. So there's 6 of those. And then there's 9 of these Centaur renders here. So they usually come in units of 3. And I should say these are all resin modules. They're all Forge World models. So again, these are a mix of contrast and the army paint. So it's like contrast back here on the hide, kind of the back end of the Centaurs. But then this is army painter here with some washes up top, contrast in the beards, on some other parts here. Some of the metallics and the bones, that's all army painter and stuff like that, the little symbols here. So these I like how they turned out. There's only like 3 different model types here. But anyway, that's a big group of them. They were a lot of fun to paint. You get a better sense here of the bases here with the corkboard and kind of the orangey yellow lava stuff. I glued a little bit of rocks onto it and stuff like that. So had a lot of fun with the bases on these. There's 2 other Centaurs here. These are leaders. This is the Centaur Taruk here. He's kind of like your main leader, your kind of unnamed leader. Same idea here. Sort of, I think it's a shyish purple I did on the back here. And then again, a different sort of skin tone here, not quite as pink, a little bit more gray. I'm not sure how to say that, but it's a little slightly off. A little bit more of a gray, softer tone, whereas these are a little bit like darker, pinker, you know, a little redder. But this guy's the leader there. And then here's kind of like the king of the Centaurs. This is Shartor, the Executioner. It's quite a bit bigger of a model. Now I have this giant in here for a different reason, which I'm gonna explain in a minute. I didn't paint this guy. I painted this guy a few years ago, actually, this giant. But you can kind of see the size of Shartor. He's almost as tall as a giant, goes up about his shoulder there. So it's a big model, really cool. Like this is sort of the hook for me to get into this army. I saw this and I was like, well, that's awesome. And then so I wanted to paint it. So he's kind of a dark character here. I painted him pretty dark. But he's got a lot of cool things in there. I just love his face and his face armor and all that stuff. And he comes on this really cool base that I kind of like shifted off a little bit. And then just so he could have the same, you know, kind of lava base as the rest of the army. So he wasn't too out of place with this. I mean, I could have just put him on there, but I wanted to keep this base because it's just a cool resin base there. So that's the other kind of main guy. And I have the last guy, I think he's like the leader of this army. This is Drazoeth the Ashen, and he's on this cow, well, flying cow with wings. And he's a little dwarf up there, a little chaos dwarf. And so this guy here you can kind of see from the back, like so. And again, just, you know, contrast mix. I'm really getting into like the mix of contrast with other paints and stuff to kind of just give different tones and things like that. Really like this guy. He's a cool model. I guess he sucks on the table. I've never actually fielded him. But the thing is this line here is apparently probably discontinued. So talking with a lot of folks, basically I could play this as 2 things. I could play it as Cities of Sigmar or as a Ever-Chosen army. With basically, if I played it with Cities of Sigmar, these guys are your Iron Drakes. They look just like them. These guys are your, whatever the battle line is for that, I don't remember. And so on. Or these guys are Marauders if you're playing the Ever-Chosen, and these guys would be the Vanguard. This guy could be if you're playing Cities of Sigmar, he could be a battle mage on a Griffin. I mean, he looks just like the dang thing. Or he could be the, I forget what the kind of the chaos version of that is, but anyway, he could be that. So what I did actually to kind of counteract that is I painted up a little unit here of Liberators. Because I think the Chaos vibe, I mean, you get that by looking at them, right? And so, but like you don't really get like good guy order vibe. So one thing you can do is if you play a Cities of Sigmar army is you can splash in Stormcast as sort of like allies, but they have like their own special rules. So I repainted here a unit of Liberators because I think I have 20 Liberators, which I don't really run anymore. So I was like, I'm gonna take a unit of 5 and I'll just repaint them. So I have them sprayed with Retributor Gold and then threw some contrast on top of that, the Black Templar and the Flesheater Red and some other stuff, and just hit some metallics in the weapons and things like that. And this turned out really cool. So now I want to repaint not all of my Stormcast, but all my Hammers of Sigmar. I'm going to paint this color and then keep the Lions of Sigmar, which I showed you back in the Warhammer Underworlds section. Keep those. So kind of a mix of these because it's kind of very Soul Warsy. These guys would be the, it's slipping my mind there. They're like the dark kind of brooding faction of the Stormcast. Oh gosh, I'm having a brain fart. That and the Lions of Sigmar are kind of the magical units and stuff. So it might be cool to mix that. So anyway, so that gives me kind of an out there if they do actually discontinue the line. A couple more things. Here's the Death Shriek rocket launcher, which has been discontinued. You can't buy this anymore. So this is kind of a cool thing with a couple of little dwarves on the back there, kind of doing that. But this could be for Cities of Sigmar. I'm forgetting the name of it. But yeah, this is just like the little rocket cannon, basically, that you can do that. I don't have any magma cannons. I wanted to get those and then I can have them as steam tanks, but that's okay. And then there's a couple of here. I'll just show you these kind of quickly here. These are sort of like the little individual units and leaders. I think I have like 5 casters. So this is kind of like a banner guy. And then this one is sort of like a leader. He gets a pistol and stuff like that. And then the rest of these, okay, here's just 2 musicians here. The drummer. And then you have this guy here. This guy actually came with the Death Shriek rocket launcher, but he's playing a flute, so he could just be the musician. And the drummer came with these 3 over here as kind of like a special leader unit. And then here are, I think it's all 4 of the Daemon Smiths. These are like the little dwarf wizards here. Now these guys are on sort of the little different bases there. But this one could easily be a runesmith in a city's army. And then either of these guys is the same base size, I think, as a battle mage. I'm sure of it. If not, I don't remember what the battle mage is. The battle mage might be that size. So I can use that guy instead. So that's cool. You don't need 4 Daemon Smiths in this army, that's for sure. And the last thing to show you here is some stuff I painted like a year or 2 years ago and some new stuff, but I wanted to show the stuff from a couple of years ago. This is called Anvil of Apotheosis. So in Age of Sigmar, you can make your own characters. And so I finished up some of them this year. Now the giant was already done. You can see there's some like green stuff in there. Like he has his skull or crystals coming out of his back. And he's got some green stuff beard and this little hammer and all that. So this one I did kind of like a frost giant, right? So he's got these ice crystals coming out. Because I would run him with my ogre army, which is always, they have the similar kind of bases with the snowy icy stuff. But with the Anvil of Apotheosis, you can kind of create your own character and give it points values and stuff based on the abilities that you give it. So I created like a giant thing. It's like 400 points and he does all this stuff, right? And then he actually even casts spells, which no giants do as far as I know. And then I also had this special vampire that I had leftover bits from one of my Flesheater guys, and then like leftover dragon skull thing and stuff, and then I threw these wings and these horns on the back of him and just made this cool crazy vampire guy just for no reason. But now you can actually create your own character. So I built a character that has kind of he is flying and all these different abilities and stuff. The other one that I did before, and I didn't count these obviously in my total count for 2020, is this guy. So this guy actually has some Tyranid bits, obviously the head and then this arm here. The rest of it is a Black Fleet Corsair or something. It's like an elf pirate. You can see he's got a little peg leg there on the side. So I mixed that in. So he's like a little Illithid or Mind Flayer kind of guy. So I built that kind of thing too. So he's like a little Mind Flayer, type of character in Age of Sigmar. Now these guys are new here. So this guy is just your normal cogsmith who I just painted up because I had him laying around from Warhammer Quest and never painted him. So I just did some metallics and different things there. So if I play this army here, these guys here, as a Cities of Sigmar, then he's just going to be my cogsmith. But this guy here, I took bits of the cogsmith, bits of Tyranid hands and stuff, and then I don't remember where I got this little stupid helmet for, but this guy is just hilarious looking. So he could be a runesmith or something, or he could be a Daemon Smith, I don't care. I mean, he does all kinds of things. So I made him some kind of like grenadier in the Anvil of Apotheosis to just give some cool abilities, so you can throw these little grenades, because they do have explosives in Age of Sigmar, just primitive ones. So anyway, that was kind of a fun one. And then this guy here, I think I call him some kind of putrid fiend. So he's like part Nurgle with the head, part Khorne. Where's the little Khorne symbol? It's on him somewhere. I think it's on him somewhere, trust me. There's a Khorne symbol on there somewhere. So Khorne armor, some Tyranid arms. Tyranid arms are great for this. And then this guy here, just all kinds of little bits. So it's like part Exalted Deathbringer from Khorne with Nurgle with Tyranid bits and stuff. So I created this guy and painted him up. And I would put him as like an Exalted Chaos Warrior if I was just going to run him straight up. Because if you played these guys as Slaves of Darkness, so again, if I play these as a Slave to Darkness army, not a Chaos Dwarf army, this guy could just make a hero or something and use those stats. Anyway, so that's it. Gone through all of it there. Again, make sure you take a look at the links below to get your 10% off, and take a look at the paint stuff. So hopefully this was interesting. You were able to look at some parts of the video and during the timestamps. Anyway, so I will see you again. Thanks.